Good morning and welcome to this webinar from Dacast. I'm Elliot Miller and today we'll be talking about budget setups for broadcasting. So we'll be taking a look at DIY tricks you can use as well as cheap places to get really good professional quality equipment. So it's going to be covering everything today. We are going to be looking at cameras and affordable places you can get those, as well as cameras we recommend for different projects. We'll also be taking a quick look at capture devices, which you will need if you want to use a more advanced camera setup. We'll also be quickly going over green screens, which I hope mine is working all right today. And we'll also touch upon audio and different options you have for audio recorders and microphones, again varying from project to project. Finally, we'll take a look at one of my favorite topics, which is DIY builds for accessories for live streaming and filmmaking. So we'll be looking at neat ways you can take things from thrift stores around the house and turn them into fantastic equipment. Finally, we'll wrap up with a question and answer session. So you can give your questions to me in chat or reach out to us on Twitter at DacastSF. Let us know what questions you have about broadcasting on a budget. So let's get started by talking about where we can get some places where we can get equipment affordably. Now, I am someone who will spend ages trawling the internet trying to find the best bargain, only to look it up on Amazon and find out it was actually cheapest there. Done this a couple of times now, been spending hours, and then it turns out actually Amazon.com is more often than not the cheapest place to buy equipment for live streaming. However, you can also try eBay, and you can sometimes find things cheaper there. You also might consider Craigslist.com if you go to their for sale section. And Craigslist is a kind of website where you can post up and be like, hey, I've got this camera, I'm selling it for $300. If you come by, you can pick it up and just pay me cash and go home that day with a second-hand camera. And it's a pretty good place to get high-end camcorders and DSLR cameras because, you know, some people have a lot of money and don't necessarily has an equal interest in broadcasting and photography. So they get these really good cameras and then don't need them after a couple of years. They buy the upgrade, but they're still just as good for video production. So it's a good place to find cameras pretty cheap. But I do have to say, be careful. It's always practice good online safety. Never agree to meet someone at their house or a location you're not comfortable with. Always agree to meet up in a public place like a Starbucks at a location that's not near either of your homes, you know, somewhere that's mutually safe. Some other options you can look at is Adorama.com, which mainly does kind of filmmaking equipment, like tripods and cameras, but you can get microphones on there as well, I believe. And occasionally they're cheaper. Very occasionally, not usually, but sometimes they have a really good mail-in rebate that can actually cut it down to below the price of Amazon. So you can have a look there if you're feeling like it. A website I've been introduced to recently is massdrop.com, which is kind of an interesting idea. It's like, it's buying on bulk with a group of people. You know, when you and your friends be like, hey, if we all pitch in together and we buy, 10 of these cameras together, we save 10%. And if we can get 100 people to do it, then we can save up to maybe 45% by ordering in bulk. And so it's a website where you can do that. I haven't found it great for getting cameras, but it's a really good place to get very high-end studio audio equipment. So audio mixers and really nice microphones. They seem to have quite a lot going on in that department. I find it quite a strange website, actually. It seems to be specifically catered to me in that it has equipment for live streaming and filmmaking production, but it also has Magic the Gathering cards and gaming keyboards and gaming mice. It's kind of this very clear, it's catered towards men in their mid-20s. So It varies in the your savings and also what the offers are currently are, but you might want to check it out. It might be some of those things that's really good in maybe 5 years' time. So keep an eye on it, see if it works for you. Great. So now let's talk about cheap cameras and where we can get cameras affordably. I'm going to turn off my web camera now, so I'm making sure I'm not covering up any of the text coming up in the following slides. So the first thing, I mean, this is like the first piece of kit you're going to need if you're doing live streaming. You're going to need a really, well, not necessarily a really nice camera, but you're going to need good video. There's not much point doing live video streaming without good video. But what kind of camera is right for you? And this really changes your overall budget for the project. You know, a wise man once said, the first $1,000 you spend on broadcasting equipment is going to make the biggest difference. It's going to have the biggest upgrade on your production, and then that's going to have diminishing returns for every $1,000. So, you know, set yourself a budget and figure out what's most important for your project, and that first spend is going to feel like a big spend, but that's going to make the biggest jump. And then after that, you can consider if you really want to invest in having more in your project. Alright, so let's take a look at what camera is right for you under different circumstances. So something like a project where it's just you, perhaps conducting an interview over Skype, or if it's yourself doing a podcast, or you know, news updates, some kind of simple kind of just face-to-face kind of journalism we've kind of seen with the webcam live streaming explosion. And you know, something where it's just you talking to a camera, a web camera, is all you need. And you're talking about spending $30 to $50 to get a really nice web camera. And that's all you're really going to need for that project, because you don't need to worry about having the highest definition video if it's just your face close to the computer. A different scenario would be something like studio production, where you've got a full set, maybe your interviews are being conducted on a sofa and you want to have the camera move, you want to have it zoom, you want to have it be able to conduct different shots. A web camera is sort of almost like a wall-mounted camera. It gets one view and that's all it's really ever going to be able to do. For a more advanced studio production, you're going to want a DSLR or a camcorder. Now, I remember back when I was in university, I was quite a few years ago now, but you know, around 2010, someone showed me for the first time a documentary. It was a documentary called Undercity. It's still on Vimeo, and it's a man goes to the places of New York City you're not supposed to be able to get to anymore. Like, he goes through sewers, and he goes behind the subway tracks, and he gets to old stations that have been closed down, but still beautiful turn-of-the-century art. And it blew me and my friends away because it was shot on a Canon 5D. And this was beautiful, and in low-light conditions as well. We'd never seen a sort of mid-range photography camera capable of cinema-level video. It absolutely blew us away. And that's something that's kind of become much more the norm in the past 5 years, is to shoot on a DSLR camera. It is basically going to cover all of your needs, and is going to be considerably cheaper than the professional grade kind of camcorders, without actually being quite inexpensive. So finally, for a kind of project we may want to consider is if it's something like a webinar, like I'm doing right now, I don't actually need a camera at all. I'm showing you my screen, I'm showing you what's coming up from my laptop. You don't need to be seeing my face right now. I showed it to you at the start so you could know who you're talking to. You have a face to put to the voice. But if it's tutorial content, showing people editing software, if it's a webinar or PowerPoint presentations, you actually don't, if the focus isn't you don't need a camera. And so that can save you quite a bit of money in your budget for your broadcasting setup. So something to consider: what level of video production do you actually need? and how much can you get away with not doing, and that's going to be able to save you money. Alright, now let's take a look at some of my favorites. I really recommend as a web camera the Logitech C920 HD Pro, and this is just a fantastic HD web camera. You can get a really nice wide field of view, and it does 1080p high definition video. So it's got a really nice big resolution, lots of pixels, lots of good quality. I have heard though, looking around on some streaming forums, a lot of people recommend using it only at 720p because the 1080p can struggle a bit when it comes to broadcasting for a long time, especially if you're running other things. You've got lots of other things in your USB ports. That's a problem with USB cameras, is you've got a lot of things plugged in that can slow down the whole process. So most people recommend using it at 720p or lower, which for this kind of shot that I have set up here, where I'm in the bottom corner, this is a 240p resolution. So you can get nice high definition, and then keep yourself small in the corner. You don't need to use the full 1080p, but you can. And the Logitech web camera is about $63 on Amazon. Bear in mind, these are all prices I looked up in the past few days. So we're in January, it's the start of the new year, there may be some January sales going on, but more or less it seems to be about $60 for this web camera. And when I looked it up on eBay and Craigslist, it was still about the same price, about $60. People know this is a really good web camera for live streaming, and they're keeping the price around $60. An alternative, if you want to go for a much more studio production kind of look, would be the Canon Rebel T5. And I found this for about $400 on Amazon, $375 on eBay, and then $300 on Craigslist. This is a camera that is quite common for people to have and be selling on Craigslist. And it shoots in 1080p, it shoots beautiful video. But because it's in a slightly older model of DSLR, its price has gone down significantly over the years, even though it's still just as good as video. So for instance, the Canon Rebel T5i has recently come out, and that's a $700 camera. It's very similar to this one, except it's got Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and geo positioning. It's got lots of extra features, but the video hasn't actually improved at all. So you can now get a Canon T5 quite cheaply because the new model is out, but it doesn't actually improve the video at all. So you're losing no video quality, but you're saving maybe $400. So have a look for DSLRs. I recommend the Canon T5 personally as a nice production camera. Okay, so now we're going to talk about capture devices, because something that's just come up with the last camera I was talking about is it's not a USB camera. We're going to have to plug it into a capture device to be able to stick it into our computer and broadcast it. So I'm going to show you a couple of options you have as capture devices then. And they vary in price quite a bit, but you're looking at a spend of around $150 if you want to upgrade to a kind of studio production broadcasting setup. So the Blackmagic Intensity Shuttle is kind of a good industry standard. It's about $200 on Amazon, and that has a wide variety of inputs. So you can take HDMI, you can take S-Video, you can take a whole bunch of things into that, and it is a very, very good piece of kit, but perhaps a bit more than you're willing to spend. A very popular capture card is the Elgato Game Capture, and that's about $140 or $145. And that has only HDMI in, but is very popular in the sort of Twitch video game live streaming world, and it's starting to bleed out into the rest of live streaming because it works, it's a very good piece of kit, and it's pretty cheap and affordable. So that's quite a good option if you want to take a DSLR or camcorder, something that has HDMI out, and be able to plug it into your computer for broadcasting. Another alternative is a new little encoder that's come out from Blackmagic, which is the Thunderbolt Mini Recorder. And that's around $137 on Amazon right now, which is a pretty good price. And this thing is tiny. This little box, as you can see, has an HDMI input and an SDI input for a much higher kind of professional camera quality. And as you can see, it's about as wide as those two ports next to each other. So this thing is smaller than a credit card. This thing is absolutely tiny. And I've seen them in use, and they do work very well. However, because it's so compact and it's so tiny, it does have a tendency to overheat, and to overheat quickly. After an hour and a half of continuous streaming, this thing was red hot. I imagine if you broadcasted for maybe 3 hours with it, it would really start to struggle, and it might just shut itself down. I've heard stories of it not making it to sort of 4 or 5 hours, that they do overheat very quickly. So not good for very long broadcasts, but actually pretty affordable if you're doing some in-house live streaming, like a situation like I'm in now. Alternatively, at the kind of really powerful higher end is the Teradek Vidue Mini, which is about $500. And these things are pretty damn powerful, pretty damn good. Probably beyond your price range if you're looking at doing budget broadcasting. I know it's certainly a dream piece of kit for me, but that's to give you some idea of where the higher end is. And if you're really taking your remote, your studio broadcast very seriously, that's a piece of kit you may want to consider if you're going to have to be live streaming for a very long time, because certainly something the Thunderbolt and Elgato struggle with is overheating. Now, of course, the other part of live streaming is the encoder, right? You've got your camera, you've maybe got a capture device if you're not using a USB camera, and then you're plugging it into your computer, and it needs to go into an encoder and broadcast to the web. And I love using OBS. That's no secret around the office. I'm a big open broadcasting software fan, and the biggest reason I'm bringing it up in my budget broadcasting setup is because it's free, and you can't really get more budget than free. So it's one of these kind of Linux-ish sort of open source software options where people can add plugins to it, add their own features, improve the quality, and things like that. So we now have a how to use OBS tutorial. It is quite difficult to learn. It is not very user-friendly. It's taken me quite a while to get comfortable with it. But if you stick at it and really make the effort to learn it, then it is something that will save you paying monthly or paying $600 for a year of an encoder like Wirecast. It's really can save you a lot of money if you make the effort to learn how to use it. Okay, so now we're going to quickly talk about green screens, because I feel like the green screen has a lot of potential. So maybe you don't need a DSLR camera and a capture card, if you're not shooting a sports event or something or a studio production. It's not really something you're going to need. Maybe a web camera is good enough for you. But that doesn't mean you can't still have a green screen very affordably, and that can help your broadcast to look more professional. So let's run through then some of the options you have when it comes to green screens. So I'm going to turn my web camera back on now so you can see me again. Hello. And green screens are not too inexpensive because they're essentially just green fabric. Like, you don't even necessarily need them to be green. You just need a nice, bold, strong color that is unlikely to be something you're wearing, and that's why green gets used a lot. Blue screens was kind of the thing in movies back in the day, and they still work, but if you've got shadow on your face, if you've got these slightly darker colors I'm wearing, blue can pick that up. So green tends to be used now because you're less likely to be wearing green. So for about $20 on Amazon, you can get just the fabric, and this will be a nice microfiber fabric that doesn't have a lot of creases, it's maybe machine washable, and it's something that's gonna look quite nice and be an effective green screen. But it is just the fabric when you buy that on Amazon. If you're not sure, because the reason I bring this up is they usually show it mounted on a frame, but you don't actually get the frame with your $20 purchase. So make sure you scroll down and it'll say things like, people who bought this green screen also bought clamps and a frame, and then you know if you're buying a complete green screen kit or just the fabric. So make sure you check that before purchasing. A complete green screen kit, you're looking at about $60 to $120. $120 tends to involve lights as well, which is quite nice. The important thing with green screens is you want to have a nice even light. You can check out our Dacast chroma key tutorial for a complete rundown on using green screens. But my personal preference is actually using a DIY kit, because all you really need is a bit of some PVC pipes and a green sheet, and for about $40 or less, you can make your own green screen mount. In fact, what I'm using today is actually just green paper. I bought a roll of green paper from Michael's and I've sellotaped it to the wall behind me. I was doing some tests earlier and it looked pretty good, but with the web camera autofocusing on my movement, sometimes I see the shadows creep up. And that's more a problem of the light in here not being perfectly even, rather than the fact that I'm using green paper. Really doesn't matter what the material is as long as it's a nice strong color. So let me turn the web camera off again, and I'm going to talk you quickly through this DIY green screen build. Obviously, I haven't got the time to completely break it down for you, but basically the idea is you're spending about $20 on PVC pipes, $5 on joining pieces and clamps, and then about $10 on fabric to make it around $40. And so what you have is a beam going across the top, 2 vertical beams, and then another beam joining them at the bottom to make a nice rectangle. And then you've got some little leg bits that come out, and you have a long piece going forwards and backwards to keep it stabilized. And then you've got the clamps to hold the green screen in place. Now, if you buy a kit, that's essentially what you're going to get. You're going to get some nice robust plastic pipes and a green screen and some clamps. So you can do that yourself and maybe save yourself about $20 depending on where you're purchasing from. And it really takes no time at all. And what's quite nice is halfway up the long sides of your rectangles, you can cut the PVC pipe and put in a join piece, so it all breaks down into pipe lengths that are maybe 4-5 feet long. It really can break down pretty small into a bag that you can carry quite easily. And this build I got from an Indiemogo video green screen on the go. So be sure to give that a search if you fancy giving this build a try yourself. So now let's talk a little bit about audio options. Definitely the most important part of broadcasting or any video production is that the audio is good quality. You can get away with not having a camera like I'm doing right now, but you really can't get away with bad audio. So let's take a look at some other options here. For USB microphones that plug straight into your laptop and require no audio units, no mixing boards, just plug in and use. The Blue Snowball is very popular, especially among the podcasting kind of community. They're about $45 and sometimes they're on sale for even cheaper. And they are a great microphone and they pick up in a nice wide area. So you can just put this on the table and it doesn't even have to be right in front of your mouth. It's just going to pick up sound and it's going to pick up really good crisp sound. Definitely always been impressed by people who broadcast with Blue Snowballs. I've never had any audio issues listening to them. If you're looking for a bit of an upgrade, the Blue Yeti is kind of the slightly... it's got slightly more functions, as well as a bit more directional use with your microphone. You can change its pickup pattern, so you can change it to suit your needs. It's closer to $100, but it is something to consider. But I find with a lot of USB microphones, you're spending at least around $50 because they're sort of an all in-house kit. Whereas a microphone itself, like the newer condenser mic, that can be about $25. I'm currently using a newer shotgun mic that was also about $20. And that's a pretty good deal. That's a pretty good deal for microphone, but you are going to need a audio unit to take that, the XLR or the jack output, and translate that into something the computer can understand. So the Zoom H4n is just a fantastic little hand recorder. The Zoom One is about $100 cheaper, but doesn't have the inputs, only has a mini jack input. So it's not going to be quite as good for taking kind of stage grade microphones and converting that into the right language for your computer. But it does come with 2 condenser mics on the top, which are actually really pretty good. I've used this out in the field at events for conducting interviews, and after a while I actually abandoned the microphone I had and started using the condenser mics instead because it gave me better sound. So I do really recommend the Zoom H4n as an all-round audio unit if you do video production. Definitely also great if you want to take a microphone like a newer condenser and plug it into your computer. So it's a slightly, the $200 can seem like a bit of a hurdle to cross, but then you're going to be able to buy a much wider variety of microphone and much cheaper microphones as well. So now let's take a look at some DIY builds for accessories and other parts that you can use during your generally just kind of like useful pieces of kit to have that you maybe don't want to actually go out and buy one by one, because it does add up and some of them are quite overpriced. If we go back for a moment to the newer condenser microphone, you can see it. The picture comes with a shock mount, and that's included in the $20 price, whereas a shock mount on its own maybe costs you $10. So why buy a $10 shock mount when you can have it included with microphones? It's pretty expensive for just a shock mount. You can make those with some elastic bands and a piece of plastic tube or even an old plastic bottle. So let's take a look at some builds that we have here. This was a build I found that I thought was quite interesting. It's an IKEA lamp that has been adjusted so that it can have a nice podcaster microphone mounted on the front of it. And then of course, once you've taken out the bulb and the cable, you've got a nice little place to secure the microphone cable down the length of the arm. So this is something you can use to move the microphone towards you, away from you, and have it nice and hovering there on the table whenever you need it. And it does a little bit of tidying with the cable. It's quite a nice build. However, when I looked it up, I found that the sort of these mic arms you can buy, they're only about $20-25 on Amazon anyway. Again, Newer is a really good brand for not the best equipment, but very good equipment at very affordable prices. So really good if you just want to try it out and see if it works for you, and then if you have problems with it, you can decide to invest in a slightly more expensive piece of kit. But so I found that actually buying a mic arm versus buying a new lamp from IKEA and cutting off the lamp head so you could put on a microphone actually costs about $20 either way. So this is a build if you have already have an old lamp sitting around, or if you can find a slightly broken, slightly sad looking one in a thrift shop for maybe $10. It's a good build if you can get the lamp arm somewhere cheap. Now this is one of my favorite builds. I think this is such a cool idea. This is a portable soundproof box for your microphone. So what you do is you go to IKEA and you get one of these little cubbyhole boxes that have a little handle on top, and that claps down as fabric when they're not pulled up right. And all you do is you just put some egg carton foam on the walls that are at the bottom, so on the 4 inside walls. And this will have the effect of stopping the sound bouncing off the walls and hitting the microphone again, and it's going to give you much crisper audio. I am quite sure you can hear the echo in this room, and I apologize for that. But unfortunately, I haven't found some egg carton foam, so I haven't made one of these. This is the simple answer for that. I did find, some friends working at an office. They just got done soundproofing all of their meeting rooms, but they didn't have any foam left over, and I was absolutely gutted. So close to making one of these. Egg carton foam can be surprisingly expensive, especially if it's soundproofing foam. But if you actually just look for packing foam rather than soundproofing foam, you can actually get the same stuff, but on a $20 price markdown. So wherever possible, think about the words you're using. Don't do a search for soundproofing. Do searches for packing foam, things that are gonna be cheaper, even though it's really, really just the same stuff. Now this is quite a cute little build that I've seen. I'm actually in the process of doing one of these myself. I'm gonna turn on my web camera again so you can see. Hello. So this is a embroidery ring. I got this for $1 or $2 at a Michael's. My girlfriend does quite a lot of knitting, so she knew where to go. And all you do is you take one of these and you get some old tights or even a piece of paper, stretch it across and sellotape it down or pin it down. And then you've got a nice pop shield to go over your microphone and stop the P's and the B's from hitting the microphone with that gust of air and creating unfortunate pop sounds. Then the only trick to it is finding a way to mount it in front of your microphone, and depending on how your microphone is set up, that's going to vary. But coat hanger wire is what is being used in the picture on the right, and is definitely really, it's something harder to get hold of now. I remember growing up, coat hangers were always made of wire, but that was kind of deemed a little bit dangerous, and they started making them all out of plastic. So if you can still get wire coat hangers, just fantastic for DIY builds for your broadcasting setup. They'll always hold their shape. They're really strong. You just sellotape them to the mic stand, and it's gonna stay there, and it's gonna block the pops. So finally, as a last build, this is one of my all-time favorites. I've been on and off trying to find the time to finish one of these I've been making myself, and this is a Steadicam rig. Now, for broadcasting, you may not find the need for it. This is going to be if you're doing sports production, if you're doing outdoor work, if you want to be able to follow people around with the camera. But it is just a great little DIY build where all you really need to do is take some metal pipes that have the screw caps, so they screw into the joint piece, and you put a weight on one end. Because the problem with a moving camera is that the center of gravity is up inside the camera, so it's going to shake the camera around a lot when it's looking forward. So all you really need to do is put it on a tripod, put it on a frame and a stick, and put a weight on the bottom to pull the center of gravity down away from the camera. You can see on the build on the left what he's done is he's got a U-frame with holes that are just so happen to be a nice standardized size for cameras, and you just buy the bolts and you can just screw it in place. And it's I think the only power tool you need for that build on the left is to drill the cap on the bottom to fit the nut and the bolt through to connect the U-mount. And then you've got 3 different positions you can put that camera in and have it on a nice steady frame, and that is the infamous $14 build Steadicam build. Whereas on the right, the shoulder mount is really great for like interview setups, especially when you're going around events. You want to be able to like conduct an interview with someone definitely really good in event live streaming where you want to be able to put a camera in someone's face and interview them after they've come down from giving their talk or a speech or what have you. And that's the same principle again. You've got PVC tubes that lock together really nicely. Some nice foam if you can get hold of it, or just wrap around a lot of tape to make it a little bit softer on your shoulders, and then weights mounted on the bottom end again, screwed in place by the kind of standard bolt size. And that's the only drilling you're going to really need to do, is to put a cap on the end so you can put the bolt through. And yeah, it's a pretty straightforward, pretty simple build. You can also see it's got a plate there. Oh, sorry, that's also some drilling there to fix the plate with the bolt for the camera. But definitely great if you want to do an interview setup. Wonderful. So now is the opportunity for you to ask me any questions. Went through that a little bit faster than I thought I was going to, but definitely willing to elaborate on a lot of builds and a lot of options and opportunities where you can get really nice high-end kit at more affordable prices. I'll just show you first while you start sending in your questions. This is my little Steadicam build I made the other day. And all it is, I found it in a thrift shop for $11, and it appears to go this way on some kind of old professional film camera. But I found if you just fold this bit out, you've actually got a really nice Steadicam mount, and then the bolt to put the camera there. So this actually doesn't have a weight mounted on the bottom, so it wasn't terribly effective when I was having a test with it, but definitely has upped my event interviews that I do in my free time when I can. Without any cost really, and also there's a bolt on the inside for me to mount my Zoom H4 for carrying the audio. First question here: what about a teleprompter? Oh, I watched a video the other day that was about doing cheap teleprompting, and I can't quite remember what it was. It's on the tip of my tongue, but I can't quite remember it. So check out Indie Mogul on YouTube, or Griffin Hammond. Griffin Hammond was the guy who did the Indie Mogul, who was kind of the face of the Indie Mogul YouTube channel, which has stopped broadcasting about 2-3 years ago now. And he still does, Griffin Hammond, he still does like good kit and affordable video production. So he always has great tips on how to get around the more expensive equipment and get really nice, good equipment cheap. For a live sporting event, what cameras and microphones would I recommend? I think you're probably gonna want a shotgun microphone, because that is a kind of microphone that will be able to get sound from further away than something like a podcaster's close microphone. Check out the VOD of the audio webinar I did last month for me to do a complete rundown on microphone options. But definitely a shotgun microphone. Again, Newer is a brand that is good but very affordable. Mine was only $20-25, my Newer shotgun microphone. For a camera, I think you're going to want a DSLR, you're going to want something like a Canon T5, because a web camera isn't going to be able to pan fast enough, it's not going to be able to have the proper depth of field or field of view to be able to see enough of the sporting event. You're going to need a DSLR mounted on a tripod, which then means you're going to need a capture card. Unfortunately, there's no way to get around that. So go for look at maybe the Thunderbolt, although it might heat up depending on how long these sporting events are. So possibly also an Elgato instead. If OBS is hard to learn, what are the alternatives? Don't be put off by learning OBS. You know, there's plenty of people I've seen who start a broadcast and then they just they don't really keep it up. And that's you've got to keep up like regular production if you want to be able to develop a following, develop a viewership. So if you can punch through that wall to learn OBS, you're already like 50% there to like keep going. And I think if you can make that effort to learn OBS, you're gonna be in a better position than if you just pay some money and then not really actually use it that much. Alternatives for cheap encoders would be, I think XSplit and vMix are both cheaper than Wirecast, but not by a huge amount. But try OBS, try it. Watch my tutorial how to use OBS and give it a go. It's just tricky to learn how to connect it to the Dacast service. There's a tutorial specifically on doing that called Broadcasting with OBS. And then once you get through that and become familiar with the way it thinks, it's not too difficult. Bear in mind though that our OBS tutorial is for a Windows computer and the Mac version looks quite different, but I believe is a little bit more user-friendly. It's still in beta, so varying stability there, but definitely consider having a look. For audio mixers, I see someone already replying to the question that Behringer makes good audio mixers. Definitely there are quite a few good options there. The question is, do you really need an audio mixer? Because an audio device to capture sound, like the Zoom H4, is going to be all you need for jacks and XLR, whereas the Zoom H1, which is only $99, will take in mini jack, like headphone jack sockets. Beyond that, if you're not taking in the source from your computer and the source from a microphone, you don't necessarily need much more input than that. The Zoom H4 has 2 inputs, so unless you're really taking in audio from a lot of different sources, you might not need an audio mixing unit. Yes, sorry, Wirecast is an encoding software. It's one of the encoding softwares we tend to recommend are vMix, XSplit, Wirecast, and OBS. Wirecast is kind of geared towards sports production. It's the kind of it's got a lot of you can do to edit the shots, to add in different effects, but is more expensive because it's that more professional grade. Flash Media Live Encoder, is that or is that not now dead? So Flash Media Live Encoder is another free encoding software and has generally become the industry standard for recommending if you want to, for testing your setup and for using a free encoder. However, Adobe have announced FMLE, Flash Media Live Encoder, is no longer going to be updated. So it could keep working for another 10 years, it could break tomorrow, and that will be the end of it. We really don't know how long Flash Media Live Encoder is going to live for, so that's why it's not that we don't recommend it, but I've started to try and push for recommending OBS instead, because that is something that's constantly being updated by a community. And we know is going to be around for years to come, whereas Flash Media Live Encoder might disappear into the ether one day. But the other limitation with Flash Media Live Encoder is you can only have one video source and you cannot do screen capture. So you can't capture what's going on the computer without getting an expensive plugin or a complicated workaround, and you can only have one camera input. So be mindful of that. It also, the other limitation of Flash Media Live is that it doesn't do audio in the codec AAC. Flash Media Live is great if you want to do a test, but I wouldn't recommend relying on it, because you could be doing a project and then nope, it's just this is the day it stops working. So it's a risk. It's a risk. It's a great test tool, but I wouldn't recommend it for long-term projects. What computer with HDMI or SDI input would you recommend for a remote location sports webcasting? That is an interesting interesting question about computers. No laptop is going to have an SDI input, and I would not recommend buying or building a desktop computer that had a capture card in it that accepted HDMI and SDI, because then you're tied to lugging around that computer whenever you want to try and do your sports broadcast. So I would instead recommend getting a capture device, like a portable one, like a Teradek or a Blackmagic, that accepts SDI and HDMI, plugging your cameras into that, and then HDMI into the computer. because that way you can use pretty much any laptop these days. And if it doesn't have an HDMI port, you can probably get a converter to get HDMI into whatever inputs your laptop takes. So really it all becomes then about processing power and this Lenovo's been pretty good. But other than that, just try and get as much RAM and the latest Intel processors you can. So like an Intel i7. And just get as much RAM as processing power and get rid of all background programs on your computer, turn off Dropbox, turn off like all the updating stuff, like gut out your laptop as best you can. So all it's doing is encoding your broadcast. Is OBS an alternative for Dacast or Wirecast? Do not be sorry for the ignorance, as you put it. That's a perfectly reasonable question. So OBS is an encoding software. It's a free-to-use one that will let you broadcast your live stream to the Dacast service. So it's an alternative to Wirecast. Any tips for getting better delay times? Unfortunately, that is beyond our power, and it's beyond your power. So we send it through us to the Akamai networks, and then they transcode it and they do stuff over there, and then it goes out and it comes back down to your viewer. So even like a really good service, you're still gonna have 5-10 seconds of delay. It's kind of impossible. There's only so fast that the whole process can be computed, and so until the world of computer technology gets a little bit faster, it's not something we can get around. You're just kind of hitting the upper limits. You can get your delay really short, but it is not going to get any better than 5 to 10 seconds, at least not for any time soon. What advice can you give about easy tests at a prospective venue to check that it's a place you can live stream from? What are basic things to test a network LAN Wi-Fi for? Okay, so this is an interesting question. Like, how can we, I'm at a remote location. I'm not familiar with the setup. How can I test it? So, ahead of time, in my spare time, I run events that are video game tournaments, and I like to live stream them if I can. So this is always my question. And the first thing when I ask, so what's your venue price if I'm hiring it? And then secondly, what is your internet connection? I want to know exactly how much it is. Tell me how good it is. So when you get there on the day and you want to do a test, or hopefully the day before, or the week before, you've got a chance to test it beforehand. Bring a laptop with you, connect to a network, and you can use Speed Test or TestMy, both .net, I believe. Those are websites where you can test your upload and your download speed. So connect to a network and give that a test. I recommend doing both Speed Test and TestMy because the results are sort of average. They vary a little bit. So take 2 tests from 2 locations. From 2 websites, and you should be able to get a good average idea of how much you're able to, how much your bandwidth is. So that's the first thing, is test the connection with TestMy or Speed Test. Secondly, I would already have a channel set up, and this is a great opportunity to use something like FMLE because it loads really quickly. You're not worrying about your audio being great for everyone. You're not worrying about having multiple cameras set up into it. You can just it launches and you can begin streaming. So you've got FMLE or an encoder on your laptop. If you're at the venue, do a test of what you think your bandwidth is going to be. Then increase it by 50% and then double it, and have someone watching the other end and saying if the audio is still coming through, if the video is coming through, and stress test it. And see how well it copes, and then then you can find out if you can push up your video quality a bit. You can find out if you need to turn it down a little bit. Is there a way to actually stop the transmission if you don't want something to be seen? If you're broadcasting by mistake, it's always good to have just a single image and have hotkeys set so you can switch that at any point. So I've got 3 different scenes. On Alt 1, I have just monitor capture. On Alt 2, I have monitor capture plus my web camera. On Alt 3 is the image you saw at the start of the broadcast, telling you the name of the broadcast and when it's going to start. So always have those hotkeys set up on your computer to be able to mute your audio and change to an image. Like, we were experiencing technical difficulties back in a moment. Really useful to always have those set up, and it varies from from Wirecast to XSplit to OBS. But if you go hunting, you'll find that there are hotkeys for switching between scenes, and so have a scene set up where you can switch to in case you're broadcasting you're not supposed to, and turn off the mute the audio, and then you can look at then nobody can see what you're doing. They're looking at the image, the audio is muted, and you can figure out what went wrong. Alternatively, you can also have a hotkey set to stop your broadcast. Again, talking about going to an unfamiliar location and broadcasting from there, doing a test. What about firewalls? That's why you should definitely do a test stream just from your laptop and see how that fares. If you, for whatever reason, you don't want to or you can't bring your camera and your full microphone setup as well, you can just use a video. Like have download a video to your computer, just like a trailer from your favorite movie, and then broadcast that, and then you can have someone else watching that, maybe in the venue or back home, and be on the phone with them, and they'll tell you if the audio is good and if the video is good and if it's naturally getting past their firewall. I think the biggest problem when it comes to broadcasting at a venue and using their internet is, are other people using the internet? So if this is a club, maybe or like a concert venue, maybe they have Wi-Fi that people can use. They want them tweeting and Instagramming live the show. That's going to eat into your bandwidth. So find out if it's something people have access to and ask them to, for your event or for their event that you're broadcasting, put a password on the Wi-Fi so you're the only one using it. Can you stream using 3G if there is no internet connection? Yes, you can, although recommend 4G if you can get it in your area. Yesterday on social media, so if you go to the Dacast Facebook page, so Facebook Dacast, or if you go to Twitter, at DacastSF, you'll find yesterday I posted up a video which was a cute little DIY build someone did, which was a live streaming backpack. So he took a camcorder, a microphone, and a webcam mounted on a helmet looking back at him with a second microphone, all going into a laptop, and then he was streaming that out with a 4G connection. He does kind of dream builds. He gets a lot of kind of sponsorship from computer companies who want to see hey, make the coolest computer you can, make it as powerful as possible, and we'll give you the pieces to do it. So it's not a very affordable build. It's not a very reasonable build. It's kind of goofy, but simple answer is yes, you can stream with 4G. If you're doing that because you're doing it from a remote location, you may come into the problem of signal. I'm thinking about mountains and valleys. I grew up in the countryside. I know how difficult it can be to maintain a signal, even if you just go one valley over. No more phone signal. It's all gone. So if you are using 4G, I recommend finding good signal and staying there if you can. Basically, you can get really nice, chunky, powerful 4G connectors that you can plug into your laptop and you can use to get internet access on the go and also broadcast. It's really not an ideal solution because you are going to use a lot of data and you are subject to the environment that you're in. Wherever possible, use a wired connection if you've got the option, but you can use 4G and there are wireless packs for that. How fast an internet connection is required? It's a nice good direct question. Yeah. It's like 1,500 kilobytes, so 1.5 megabytes, give or take. So really, you want about 1.5, 2 megabytes upload speed, and that is different from your download speed. So go to testmy or speedtest.net. Run a test on both of them, not at the same time, because they'll ruin each other's results. So in turn, and check your upload speed. And what you want is about 1 megabyte to 2 megabyte. Anything over that, and you should be all right. The bigger problem is actually if you're doing it from home and other people are using internet at the same time. So if you've got a family who likes to watch YouTube, kick them out for the afternoon. Send them to the movies while you do your broadcast. If it's a bit on the wire, you want megabyte, 2 megabytes, but if it's on the wire, make sure you're the only one using the internet. Yes, Ethernet is always the best. Wherever possible, you want a wired connection. Wireless is if you have no other choice, if it really is a demand situation. You know, wireless streaming is something you want to do from a GoPro on a skydiver. You know, when there's really, like, you just can't do anything else about it. A really cool pseudo-wireless live streaming project was a real-life video game that was live streamed to a webcam chat site called Chat Roulette, where people would be watching and be able to see what's going on, and they would control the person in this real-life game, this film production in the UK created called Realm Pictures. So I did an interview with them called Interactive Live Streaming Event, video game, something like that. Certainly look up real-life video game by Realm Pictures. So what they did, watch the behind-the-scenes footage because it's a great idea. They have a camera, sorry, not a camera, they have a helmet, and then they have a GoPro on the chin connected to a Teradek cube on the top of the helmet. Now, the wireless signal trying to get through the walls of the building, trying to get through the trees of the garden, couldn't reach their sort of control room. So what they did was instead, so there's a group of zombies who's chasing this guy around, and you've got to escape the haunted house. That's the game the people are playing. So the zombie at the far back is strapped with a backpack and an antenna. Just far enough back so you can't really see him. So the wireless signal is going so it's wired from the GoPro to the Teradek cube, and then that was broadcasting to a man with an antenna who was about 20, 30 feet away at all times, and then he had a massive long wire cable that ran all the way around the grounds of the house and back to the control room. So check out real life video game behind the scenes, and it'll be a video by Realm Pictures on YouTube, and that was how they worked around doing wireless streaming when they had to, and had a really quite a nice fix. But that was definitely not budget broadcasting. So feel free to reach out to me on Twitter at DacastSF, or you can email me directly at elliot@dacast.com, or leave a comment on our Facebook page. Just search Dacast, and let us know if you have any other comments, any ideas for future webinars, or if there is any other information we can provide you to help you with your live streaming project. Thank you very much for watching, and happy streaming.